I thought I just tripped, but it was a deliberate shove, and that mocking perfect fall triggered a revenge plan that couldn't be undone. They thought I was poor, just the family ATM who'd always pay their bills and clean up their messes. But I was the one who held their signatures, their fraudulent claims, their stolen identity documents. The family party was just a stage, and tonight, I'd be the one turning on the lights. They'd been debiting my life for 20 years. Time to balance the books. My name is Ava Whitaker, and I've fallen for my family more times than I can count. But tonight's fall at the Lantern House was different. It was the last one. The private dining room smelled of garlic butter and expensive cologne, the kind Calvin always wore to compensate for his empty bank account. I was carrying a tray of champagne flutes across the polished stone floor, still damp from where the waitstaff had mopped up someone's spilled cocktail. The string quartet played something classical in the corner, their notes bouncing off the vaulted ceiling as my cousin Emma showed off her engagement ring to a circle of admiring relatives. I saw it happening in slow motion. My mother, Lorraine, stepped back just as I approached, her shoulder blade connecting with my ribs. Calvin smoothly pivoted left, blocking my path to steady myself. Then came Dylan's elbow sharp, deliberate, catching me in the spine. The tray flew. Champagne arced through the air like liquid diamonds under the chandelier light. I hit the floor hard, my knee cracking against stone, my dress soaking up the alcohol and shame in equal measure. The music stopped. Perfect fall. Dylan's laugh cut through the sudden silence, and a few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd of 40-some relatives. Classic Ava. I stayed down for 3 seconds. Not because I was hurt, but because I was cataloging. The familiar burn of humiliation, the practiced cruelty. The way my mother's lips twitched with satisfaction before morphing into theatrical concern. "Oh, honey," Lorraine gasped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You really must be more careful. This is Emma's special night." The venue manager appeared, clipboard in hand, calculating damages. 7 crystal flutes at $75 each, plus the champagne. The deposit won't cover this. "Ava will handle it," my mother said smoothly, not even looking at me as I pulled myself up. "Won't you, dear?" I reached for my purse, fingers finding the supplementary credit card I'd discovered 2 weeks ago, one opened in my name without my knowledge, already maxed out. I'd kept it for exactly this moment. I swiped it, knowing it would decline. The machine beeped its rejection. The manager frowned. "Do you have another card?" "Oh, Ava." Lorraine's voice dripped disappointment. Not again. How embarrassing for the family. She turned to the relatives, shaking her head. "She's always been troubled with money. We try to help, but—" Dylan smirked, pulling out his wallet with a flourish. "Don't worry, I got it. Someone in this family has to be responsible." The crowd murmured approval. Dylan, the golden child who hadn't worked a real job in 3 years, playing the hero with money he'd claimed from a workers' comp fraud I'd documented 6 ways to Sunday. I stood there, champagne dripping from my hem, watching them perform their practiced routine. The concerned mother, the responsible son, the disappointing daughter. They'd assigned me this role since I was 13, when I'd started working at the grocery store and they'd discovered I could be tapped like an ATM. "Thank you, Dylan," I said quietly, brushing a wet strand of hair from my face. "That was very generous." He preened. Calvin clapped him on the back. Lorraine beamed with maternal pride. "Maybe you should head home." "Ava," my mother suggested, "change into something appropriate." "You can come back for cake." I looked at each of them, really looked. At the HELOC loan documents sitting in my car with my forged signature. At the insurance policies with mysteriously changed beneficiaries. At the power of attorney forms I'd never signed but somehow existed. "You're right," I said, my voice steady as a balanced ledger. "I should go change." As I walked toward the door, leaving wet footprints on their expensive stone floor, I heard Dylan call out, "Try not to fall on your way out." More laughter. The quartet resumed playing. I paused at the threshold, turned back just enough for them to see my profile. "Don't worry," I said, loud enough for only the closest relatives to hear. "You've all just signed your own receipts." My mother's smile flickered, uncertain. Calvin's hand hesitated on his champagne glass, but Dylan was already 3 drinks in, already turning back to his audience, already forgetting I existed. They had no idea that every transaction, every fraudulent signature, every stolen penny had been documented, verified, and prepared for legal filing. They had no idea that Marisol Vega was waiting for my call, that forensic accountants had already reviewed my evidence, that the Department of Insurance had an open investigation. They thought tonight was about Emma's engagement. They were wrong. Tonight was the beginning of their audit. The ledger started when I was 13. A composition notebook from the dollar store. Pages ruled with blue lines that I turned into columns: date, amount, reason, never repaid. The first entry was $20 from my grocery store job, taken from my dresser drawer while I slept. "Emergency gas money," my mother had said when I asked. The emergency turned out to be her weekly manicure. By 15, I'd filled 3 notebooks. By 18, I'd switched to Excel. By 25, working at Peregrine Harbor Capital, I'd built a forensic-grade database that would make the IRS weep with joy. The pattern was always the same. A crisis would emerge, rent was due. Dylan needed hockey equipment. Mom's mysterious medical appointments that never produced insurance claims. The ask would come wrapped in guilt. Family helps family. Ava, don't be selfish. Calvin arrived when I was 22, smooth as his counterfeit Rolex. Within 6 months, he'd taught my mother the art of credit rotation: open a card, max it out, shuffle the balance, repeat. He'd gesture with his hands like a conductor, explaining how money was just energy that needed to flow. The energy always flowed from my accounts to theirs. "You're so good with numbers, princess," he'd say, his cologne thick enough to choke on. "Help your old dad out with this tax thing." The tax thing would turn out to be him claiming me as a dependent while I was living 3 states away. The refund would vanish into another of his investment opportunities. Dylan, meanwhile, had perfected the role of golden child, star athlete until he wasn't, music producer until he wasn't, entrepreneur until he wasn't. Each failure cost thousands my thousands while Mom spun stories about his potential. "He's finding himself," she'd insist, as I paid for his 3rd apartment deposit in 2 years. The breaking point came 3 weeks before Emma's engagement party. I'd been reviewing my credit report for a mortgage application when I found it a home equity line of credit on a house I didn't own, using my social security number and a signature that looked like mine if you'd only seen it once. $75,000, drawn down to 0. That same day, I discovered the rest: 2 life insurance policies where Calvin had replaced me as my own beneficiary. Power of attorney documents filed with the state, giving my mother control over my financial decisions in case of incapacitation. Credit cards, store accounts, even a business loan for one of Calvin's shell companies, all bearing my name and fabricated consent. But the masterpiece was Dylan's workers' compensation claim, a devastating knee injury from a workplace accident. He'd claimed $15,000 in medical bills, ongoing disability payments, vocational rehabilitation funds. Except his Instagram showed him skiing in Aspen 2 weeks after the accident, and his TikTok featured him breakdancing at a club in downtown Denver. I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by printouts, looking at 21 years of theft disguised as love. The total was $237,000, not counting interest, lost credit opportunities, or therapy bills. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, had asked me once why I kept paying. "What are you afraid would happen if you said no?" "They'd stop loving me," I'd answered without thinking. She'd tilted her head. "What makes you think they love you now?" The silence that followed had been worth more than any payment I'd ever made. I started building my case the way I'd build a compliance review at Peregrine Harbor, every document scanned and backed up, every signature analyzed by a handwriting expert, every transaction traced to its endpoint. I hired Marisol Vega with my annual bonus, a fighter who'd grown up in foster care and had no patience for family manipulation. "This is criminal," she'd said, flipping through my evidence binders. "Not just civil, criminal fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. Your brother's looking at federal charges for the workers' comp alone." "I know," I'd said. "They're your family," she'd warned. "Not judgment, but preparation. This will burn every bridge." "They already did that," I'd replied. "Tss, they just made me pay for the matches." The week before the party, Calvin had called asking for a small loan of $5,000. "Cash flow issue," he'd said. "You know how it is." I'd declined politely. The calls from my mother started an hour later, each one escalating. Disappointment, anger, tears. Then Dylan's text, "Way to abandon family. Real classy." I'd screenshot everything, adding it to the file marked Exhibit M pattern of coercion. They thought poverty was my weakness. They were wrong. Numbers were my language, compliance my weapon, and patience my strength. Every receipt they'd never kept, I had. Every lie they'd told, I'd documented. Every dollar they'd stolen had left a trail, and I'd followed each one to its source. The family party invitation had arrived last week, embossed and elegant. Celebrating Emma's engagement. It read, "Formal attire required." I'd RSVP'd yes immediately. They wanted formal, I'd give them formal. A formal reckoning, properly documented, legally certified, and publicly delivered. The ledger was about to close. The investigation became my second job. Every night after leaving Peregrine Harbor, I'd sit at my dining table with my laptop, external drives, and color-coded folders, turning my apartment into a financial crime unit. The skills I used to trace insider trading and money laundering at work translated perfectly to unraveling my family's web of fraud. I started with the HELOC loan. The digital signature had been lifted from an old apartment lease. I found the source document in my email from 4 years ago. The metadata showed it had been copied and pasted using basic PDF editing software at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday from an IP address that traced back to Calvin's home office. The notary who'd witnessed my signature. She worked at the bank where Calvin's golf buddy was a loan officer. One call to the notary board confirmed she'd been out of state that day. The insurance policies were easier. The beneficiary changes had been submitted online using my mother's laptop, the same MAC address that posted her Facebook updates about ungrateful children and sacrificing everything for family. The password reset emails had gone to an account she'd created, avaytaker28gmail.com. She hadn't even been creative with the forgery. But Dylan's workers' comp fraud was my masterpiece of detection. I'd pulled his social media archives, downloaded before he could delete them. The ski trip photos were geotagged. The breakdancing video had witnesses tagged 7 people who'd been at the club. His Venmo history showed payments for DJ equipment rental and event setup during the exact weeks he'd claimed to be bedridden. I hired a private investigator, Marcus Webb, a former insurance investigator who knew exactly what prosecutors needed. He got video of Dylan loading speakers into his truck, hauling turntables up 3 flights of stairs, and practicing parkour moves in a public park. Each video was date-stamped, GPS verified, and saved in triplicate. The paper trail was even more damning. Dylan had been paying Calvin's shell company, Rourke Enterprises LLC, exactly $900 monthly, just under the reporting threshold. Calvin would then transfer it back through 2 other shells before it landed in Dylan's emergency medical fund. They were laundering workers' comp payments to hide Dylan's unreported income. Marisol subpoenaed the bank records through discovery in our civil filing. What we found exceeded my expectations. 6 other family members had been pulled into smaller schemes. Cousins who'd co-signed loans they thought were canceled. An elderly aunt whose retirement account had been drained through a POA she didn't remember signing. Even Emma's parents had lost $12,000 to one of Calvin's sure-thing investments. I created a master spreadsheet with 9 tabs: HELOC fraud, insurance fraud, workers' comp fraud, identity theft, tax fraud, elder abuse, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Each entry included date, amount, documentation source, legal statute violated, and statute of limitations remaining. The formulas calculated interest, penalties, and potential restitution amounts. The FBI would have been proud of my link analysis chart, a visual web showing how money flowed between 43 different accounts, all eventually enriching Lorraine, Calvin, and Dylan while draining everyone else. I discovered Calvin had done this before. 3 previous wives in 2 other states, similar patterns, sealed settlements. He was smart enough to stay just under federal thresholds, keeping each scheme state-specific to avoid interstate commerce triggers. But he'd gotten sloppy with me, maybe because I'd paid so quietly for so long. The metadata told stories they'd never intended to write. Logan Times showed Dylan filing for disability benefits while simultaneously posting Instagram stories from a concert. Email headers revealed my mother forwarding my personal information to Calvin with subject lines like, "For the thing we discussed." Browser histories subpoenaed from their ISP showed searches for, "Is forging family signature illegal?" and "Statute of Limitations Identity Theft Colorado." They'd even been stupid enough to use cloud storage. Calvin's Google Drive, which he'd accidentally shared with me while trying to send a legitimate document 2 years ago, contained templates for forging my signature, spreadsheets calculating how much they could extract before I'd notice, and a folder labeled AW Project with every fraudulent document they'd ever created. I screenshot everything, converted files to PDF-A format for court admissibility, and created hash values to prove nothing had been altered. Every piece of evidence was backed up to 3 separate encrypted drives, with one copy held by Marisol and another in a safe deposit box. The State Department of Labor and Employment opened their investigation after I submitted 17 pieces of evidence through their fraud portal. The Department of Insurance assigned a senior investigator after reviewing my submission. The banks initiated their own internal investigations once presented with proof of notary fraud. My favorite discovery came last week. Dylan had bragged about his brilliant workers' comp scheme in a group chat with his friends. One of them, apparently blessed with a conscience, had already reported him to the state fraud hotline. They were building their own case. Mine would seal it. I pulled my credit reports weekly now, watching as inquiries appeared from law enforcement agencies. The investigations were moving. The authorities were building their cases. The net was tightening. But I wanted more than legal justice. I wanted them to feel what I'd felt that moment of public humiliation. The weight of everyone's eyes, the knowledge that everyone finally saw the truth. That's when I started planning for the engagement party. They thought they knew me, quiet Ava, pushover Ava, always good for money Ava. They had no idea who I'd become. The first step was surgical cutting off their access to my life. At 6:15 a.m. on a Monday, I sat at my computer with a checklist and began the systematic amputation of financial tentacles they'd wrapped around me for 2 decades. Credit freeze with all 3 bureaus complete. 2-factor authentication on every account, with backup codes they'd never accessed done. New bank accounts at institutions where they had no connections established. I changed every password to randomly generated 30-character strings, stored in an encrypted manager they couldn't crack if they had a quantum computer. The certified letters went out that afternoon. Formal revocation of any power of attorney, real or fabricated. Cease and desist notices for using my personal information. Notification to retailers, banks, and credit cards that any account opened with my SSN after that date was fraudulent. Each letter was sent with return receipt requested, signature required. My mother called within hours of receiving hers. "Ava, what is this?" Her voice pitched between confusion and rage. "Some lawyer is saying I committed fraud. This is insane. After everything I've done for you, I let silence fill the space where my apology used to live." "Are you there?" she demanded. "Answer me." "I'm recording this call, Lorraine," I said calmly. "Colorado is a one-party consent state. Do you wish to continue?" The sharp intake of breath told me she understood this wasn't the old Ava. You're recording your mother. What kind of daughter? The kind who discovered 75,000 in HELOC fraud. I interrupted. Would you like to discuss that on a recorded line? She hung up. The family phone tree activated immediately. 16 calls in 3 hours. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all with the same script. Family doesn't do this. You're overreacting. Your mother is heartbroken. Think about what you're doing. Dylan needs that compensation. Calvin is just trying to help. I responded to each with the same text. My attorney has advised me not to discuss ongoing legal matters. Please direct all communications through Marisol Vega's office. Then I blocked their numbers. Dylan tried a different approach, showing up at my apartment building at 11:20 p.m., buzzing my intercom repeatedly. Come on, Ava, let me up. We need to talk. I called building security. Then I called the police. The report would be useful for the restraining order Marisol was preparing. Calvin was smarter. He sent an email from his lawyer, some strip mall attorney who probably owed him money, threatening to sue me for defamation. Marisol laughed when I forwarded it. Let them sue, she said. Discovery would be a gift. We'd get access to everything. The institutional responses were more satisfying. Banks started their investigations, freezing the suspicious accounts. The insurance companies launched reviews of the beneficiary changes. The Department of Labor sent Dylan a notice of investigation, suspending his benefits pending review. But the real power move came when I declined to sponsor the family reunion they'd planned for next month, an event they'd already promoted, assuming I'd cover the $10,000 venue deposit as always. Ava's having some issues, my mother told everyone, trying to save face. We're working through them as a family. The venue called me directly. They had my card on file from previous events. Ms. Whitaker, we haven't received the deposit for your family's reunion. I'm not affiliated with that event, I said. Any contracts should be with the person who made the booking. That person was Lorraine, who'd never had $10,000 in her account in her life. The reunion was canceled. The family gossip mill churned. Sides were being chosen, though most didn't know the full story yet. Some relatives reached out privately, sharing their own experiences of lending money that was never returned, of signatures that appeared on documents they'd never seen. Emma called me 2 weeks before her engagement party. Ava, I don't know what's happening with you and Aunt Lorraine, but please come to the party. Your family. Sweet Emma, whose parents had lost $12,000 to Calvin's schemes. I'll be there, I promised. Really, Aunt Lorraine said you might cause a scene. I just want to celebrate with family, I said. I'm even putting together a special presentation about family bonds, something everyone will remember. That's so sweet. Can I see it early? It's a surprise, I said. But I promise, everyone will get a copy. Marisol refined our strategy over coffee. The civil suits are solid. Criminal charges are building. But you want the public reveal. That's risky. They humiliated me publicly for years, I said. Every family gathering, every birthday, every holiday, always in front of everyone, always with witnesses who laughed along. And if they try to stop you, then everyone will see them trying to suppress evidence of their crimes, I said. Either way, the truth comes out. She smiled. You've thought this through. I'm a compliance analyst, I reminded her. I've thought through 17 contingencies and prepared for all of them. The restraining order was filed but not served. We'd wait until after the party for maximum impact. The criminal investigations were progressing but sealed. The civil suits were prepared but not filed. Everything was positioned. Every piece was in place. The party was in 5 days, and I had one more preparation to make, creating a presentation that would destroy them as thoroughly as they'd tried to destroy me, but with one crucial difference. Everything I'd show would be true. The bait needed to be irresistible. I created something Dylan couldn't refuse: easy money wrapped in his favorite delusion of being a successful entrepreneur. I established the Morrison Creative Arts Grant, a legitimate entity registered with the state, complete with EIN and a professional website built in 2 hours. The grant's mission supporting emerging event planners and entertainment professionals in Colorado. The catch: all applicants needed to provide their business EIN and banking information for direct deposit. The email went to Dylan from Grantson Morrison Creative Org at 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday. Dear Mr. Whitaker, your event planning work has come to our foundation's attention through social media outreach. We're offering rapid deployment grants of $15,000 for qualified entertainment professionals. Application deadline: this Friday. Requirements: business EIN, bank routing information, and brief portfolio. Interested parties should respond within 24 hours for priority processing. Dylan bit within 30 minutes. His response included everything the EIN for Rourke Enterprises LLC, Calvin's shell company, he wasn't supposed to be connected to, his personal bank routing and account numbers, the same account receiving unreported income while on disability, and a portfolio featuring photos from events he'd worked during his injury period. But the crown jewel was his business registration form, claiming he'd been operating since before his workplace accident. He'd just documented his own workers' comp fraud in writing. I forwarded everything to Marisol and the Department of Labor investigator. This is conspiracy to commit fraud, Marisol confirmed. He's proving the connection between him and Calvin's LLC. This establishes the money laundering pattern. The private investigator, Marcus, had been busy too. He'd captured Dylan hauling DJ equipment up a fire escape 3 nights earlier, then performing a backflip off a loading dock. The timestamp matched Dylan's disability report claiming he was unable to walk without severe pain that same day. I sent Dylan a follow-up email. Your application is under review. The foundation will be conducting due diligence, including verification with the Department of Labor and Employment regarding any conflicting obligations. His panicked call came within minutes. I let it go to voicemail. Ava, I know this is you. What the fuck are you trying to do? This is entrapment, I'll sue you. I transcribed the voicemail and added it to the evidence file. Him knowing it was me proved he knew what he was doing was wrong. Meanwhile, I triggered the KYC Know Your Customer review on the HELOC account. Banks are required to investigate suspicious activity, and a $75,000 loan with questionable signatures certainly qualified. I submitted the handwriting analysis, the metadata evidence, and the notary board's confirmation that their notary was out of state during the supposed signing. The bank's fraud department called within 48 hours. Ms. Whitaker, we're freezing the HELOC account pending investigation. We'll need affidavits from you regarding the signature authentication. I'll have my attorney send them today, I said, along with evidence of who actually used those funds. Calvin's construction projects, all paid from the HELOC, would grind to a halt the moment his checks bounced. For the insurance policies, I filed formal challenges with both companies, including the metadata showing the beneficiary changes came from my mother's devices. I also pointed out that the signature on the change forms didn't match any of my legitimate signatures on file with them. We're initiating a fraud investigation, the senior investigator told me. If these signatures are forged, the beneficiary changes are void, and criminal charges may apply. The state's response to Dylan's workers' comp fraud was swift. They scheduled an independent medical examination for the following Monday, the day after the engagement party. They also subpoenaed his financial records, including any unreported income. The Morrison Creative Arts grant application would be Exhibit A. Calvin made one last attempt to negotiate, calling from a number I hadn't blocked yet. Ava, princess, this has gotten out of hand. Let's talk like adults. I'm sure we can work something out. Are you offering to return the $237,000 your family has stolen from me? I asked. Stolen is a strong word. It's the word the district attorney will use, I interrupted, along with fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. You wouldn't. I already have. The silence stretched before he spoke again, his smooth voice cracking. Your mother will be destroyed. She should have thought of that before she forged my signature. Dylan could go to prison. He should have thought of that before committing fraud. You'll be alone, he said, playing his last card. No family at all. Calvin, I said calmly. I've been alone since I was 13. I just didn't know it yet. I hung up and blocked his number. The final touch was elegant. I sent the engagement party venue a courtesy notice that several attendees were under investigation for financial crimes and that law enforcement might need to conduct interviews during the event. I suggested they might want to have extra security on hand. The venue manager called Emma's parents, concerned. Emma's parents called Lorraine, worried. Lorraine called everyone, furious. The family group chat exploded. Ava's lost her mind. She's trying to ruin Emma's party. Someone needs to stop her. Emma texted me privately. People are saying crazy things. You're still coming, right? Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied. I've prepared something special. Everything was in motion. The investigators were ready. The evidence was packaged. The presentation was perfect 15 slides that would take 90 seconds to deliver and a lifetime for them to forget. Dylan thought he was brilliant for the fake injury. Calvin thought he was untouchable behind his shell companies. Lorraine thought she was clever with her forged signatures. They were about to learn what real planning looked like. The Lantern House's AV team was surprisingly professional for a venue that usually hosted weddings and retirement parties. I met with them 3 days before the party under the guise of Peregrine Harbor Capital's compliance training demonstration. We need to test our fraud detection presentation system, I explained to James, the technical director. My company is paying for a full rehearsal. Would Saturday evening work? Say 7 o'clock? That's during the Whitaker-Morrison engagement party, he said, checking his tablet. Perfect timing, I said, sliding a check across the desk. We'll need 90 seconds during their reception. Consider it a live demonstration. The family already approved it. I'm Ava Whitaker. The check was for $5,000. James stopped asking questions. We did 3 run-throughs. The slides would display on all 4 walls simultaneously through their projection mapping system. The audio would cut through their house speakers. The timing was automated once started. It couldn't be stopped without killing the entire AV system. The presentation itself was a masterpiece of brevity. 15 slides, 6 seconds each. No accusations, no emotions, just documents and data. Slide 1, the forged HELOC signature side by side with my authentic signature. Slide 2, the metadata showing Calvin's IP address creating the forgery. Slide 3, Dylan's workers' comp claim form. Slide 4, Dylan hauling DJ equipment, timestamp visible. Slide 5, his Instagram post from Aspen, geotagged during his bed rest. Slide 6, the Morrison Creative Arts Grant application with his EIN admission. Slide 7, bank transfers between Rourke Enterprises and Dylan's account. Slide 8, the insurance beneficiary changes with IP traces to Lorraine's device. Slide 9, the fraudulent power of attorney documents. Slide 10, Calvin's Google search history. Statute of limitations, fraud Colorado. Slide 11, the total stolen $237,847 in bold red numbers. Slide 12, screenshots of their group chat planning the frauds. Slide 13, the state investigation reference numbers. Slide 14, the FBI case number for interstate wire fraud. Slide 15, full documentation available at your table. Each slide was branded with the official seals of the Department of Labor, Department of Insurance, and State Attorney General's Office, all public domain images, completely legal to use. The envelopes were more personal. 43 cream-colored packets, 1 for each guest, sealed with a notary stamp. Inside copies of the forged documents, the investigation notices, instructions for checking their own credit for fraud, and a business card for Marisol Vega. In case you've also been victimized. I paid the venue's banquet captain $300 to place them at each seat during the cocktail hour. Face down, labeled Important Family Information Open After Toast. Marisol made the strategic calls. The insurance investigator, Sandra Chin, no relation, despite the name, would be in the parking lot in an unmarked car. The Labor Department investigator would be at the bar, nursing a club soda. They weren't there to arrest anyone that would come later, but to observe reactions and take voluntary statements from witnesses. Remember, Marisol coached, you're not accusing, you're informing, you're not angry, you're helpful, you're not destroying them, You're protecting other family members from similar fraud. I rehearsed my 90-second speech until it was muscle memory. Family is about trust. Tonight, I need to share information about trust violations affecting our family's financial security. What you're about to see are verified documents from state and federal investigations. Please check your own accounts. If you've been affected, resources are at your table. Neutral, professional, devastating. The venue security was briefed by their manager about potential disruptions. 2 off-duty police officers would be stationed near the exits hired by the venue, not me, for liability purposes. I prepared 3 identical laptops with the presentation, each on a different trigger system. If they stopped one, the others would activate. The cloud backup would push to the screens if all 3 failed. I'd learned redundancy from years of compliance audits. My dress arrived Thursday black, professional, bulletproof in its simplicity. No jewelry they'd given me, no shoes they'd bought, nothing that connected me to them except DNA and debt. The wheeled briefcase contained 50 copies of the full evidence binder in case guests wanted to take them home. Each was tabbed, indexed, and included a FAQ, what is wire fraud, how to report identity theft, resources for victims of family financial abuse. Dylan called from another new number on Friday night. Ava, the Department of Labor is saying my benefits are suspended. What did you do? I submitted evidence of fraud, I said simply. The truth did the rest. You're really going through with this, at Emma's party. You mean the party where you all laughed when I fell, where Mom called me an embarrassment, where you said, perfect fall, like it was the punchline to a joke. Silence. Yes, I continued. That's exactly where I'm going through with this. We'll stop you. You're welcome to try. It will make the footage more compelling. He hung up. I did a final equipment check at 2 a.m. Saturday. Batteries charged, presentations loaded, documents printed, evidence backed up to 7 different locations. Marisol on speed dial, investigators briefed, venue prepared. I stood in my apartment, looking at 21 years of records spread across my table. Every birthday card with a request for money, every Christmas guilt trip, every manipulated family gathering where I was both the ATM and the punchline. Tomorrow, the spotlight they'd always put on my failures would illuminate their crimes instead. I picked up the card Emma had sent with the invitation. Can't wait to celebrate with all the family, she'd written in gold ink. Neither could I. The stage was set, the evidence was packaged, the authorities were waiting. Time to balance the books. The lantern house glowed amber in the September evening, its windows casting honeyed light onto the valet line where relatives emerged from cars they couldn't afford. I parked myself and walked through the main entrance at 7:15, my briefcase rolling behind me with the soft certainty of good bearings. The cocktail hour was in full swing. The string quartet played something baroque while waiters circulated with champagne. I knew my mother hadn't paid for Emma's parents were footing the bill, still unaware that 12,000 of their savings had vanished into Calvin's investments. I saw them immediately. Lorraine held court near the ice sculpture, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's rent, laughing at something Calvin was saying. His hand rested possessively on her lower back, the fake Rolex catching the light. Dylan stood with a cluster of cousins, demonstrating a dance move that should have been impossible with his devastating knee injury. Emma rushed over, radiant in her engagement glow. You made it. Everyone said you might not come. Wouldn't miss it, I said, embracing her carefully. I have something special planned for after the toasts. Mom mentioned you were doing a presentation about family bonds. That's so sweet. If only she knew. The banquet captain caught my eye and nodded slightly. The envelopes were placed. I could see them at each setting, cream rectangles against the burgundy tablecloths, waiting like small bombs. Ava. My mother's voice cut through the quartet. She approached with the studied grace of a predator, Calvin flanking her. I'm surprised you showed your face after your recent behavior. Hello, Lorraine. I kept my voice neutral. Calvin. Princess, Calvin said, his cologne preceding him. You look well. though I hear you've been having some mental health challenges. The groundwork for their narrative, Crazy Ava, Unstable Ava, Not to be believed Ava. I've never been better, I said. In fact, I've been remarkably productive. You'll see. Dylan appeared, his gait perfectly normal despite claiming he couldn't walk without assistance. Hey, sis, no hard feelings about the other night. Right, just family being family. Actually, Dylan, I wanted to thank you for that night. I met his eyes steadily. The perfect fall comment especially. It clarified everything. Something in my tone made him step back. What's that supposed to mean? You'll see in about, I checked my watch, 43 minutes. The dinner bell rang. Guests filed into the main ballroom, finding their seats. I was at table 8, strategically placed where I could see all 4 projection walls. The insurance investigator sat at the bar, pretending to check her phone. The Labor Department investigator had positioned himself near the exit. The salads arrived. Conversations bubbled. Nobody had opened their envelopes, yet they were following the instruction to wait until after the toast. Emma's father stood first, tapping his glass. He spoke about love, commitment, and family values. The irony wasn't lost on me. His family values had cost him $12,000. Lorraine went next. Her performance, Oscar-worthy. Family is everything, she declared, dabbing at dry eyes. We support each other through thick and thin. We're there for each other, no matter what. I almost applauded the audacity. Calvin raised his glass next, his voice smooth as his cons. To trust, he said, the foundation of every family. Then Dylan, who shouldn't have been standing without excruciating pain, bounded up to the microphone. Emma's always been like a sister to me, and just like with my actual sister, he looked directly at me. We know how to keep each other grounded, sometimes with a little push when needed. Scattered laughter. A few relatives who'd witnessed my fall at the cocktail party chuckled knowingly. That was my cue. I stood, raising my hand to the AV booth. James nodded. Before we continue, I said, my voice carrying through the wireless mic I'd prearranged, I have a brief presentation about family trust. 90 seconds of your time. Lorraine's face went pale. Ava, sit down. It's about protecting our family, I continued, moving to the center of the room. From fraud. The lights dimmed. The first slide illuminated all 4 walls, my forged signature, grotesquely enlarged, next to my real one. Gasps rippled through the room. This signature was used to steal $75,000 through a fraudulent home equity loan, I said calmly as the slides advanced automatically. Here's the IP address that created it. Here's Calvin Rourke's home office. Calvin stood. Turn this off. But the slides kept coming. Dylan's workers' comp claim. Dylan carrying DJ equipment. Dylan in Aspen. The room erupted in murmurs. That's fraud, someone whispered. Workers' comp fraud, I confirmed as the Morrison Creative Arts Grant application appeared. And here's where he documented his own crime. Turn it off! Dylan lunged toward the AV booth, but the 2 security officers stepped forward. He stopped, trapped in the center of the room as his lies covered the walls, the slides showing the money laundering between accounts, the insurance fraud, the Google searches about statutes of limitations, then the total $237,847 in burning red numbers. You fucking bitch! Dylan screamed, starting toward me. He took 3 steps before his injured knee supposedly gave out, but everyone had just seen him bound to the microphone and lunge toward the booth. He tried to recover, grabbing his knee theatrically, but the performance was blown. He fell, truly, fell onto the polished floor, his knee hitting the same stone that had bruised mine weeks ago. The room went silent except for the automated presentation clicking through the final slides, the investigation numbers, the FBI case reference. Then, cutting through the silence, Emma's voice, shocked but clear. Perfect fall. The room exploded. The insurance investigator moved first, her credentials already in hand as she approached Calvin. Mr. Rourke, I'm Sandra Chen with the State Insurance Commission. We'd like to discuss the beneficiary changes on these policies. The Labor Department investigator was already photographing Dylan on the floor, still clutching his knee in a performance nobody was buying anymore. Mr. Whitaker, I'm from the Department of Labor. Your medical evaluation has been moved to tonight. Lorraine grabbed the microphone, her mask finally cracking. This is all lies. She's sick. She's always been jealous of our family. But guests were already opening their envelopes, pulling out the documentation. Emma's father held up the forged power of attorney, his face darkening as he recognized implications. An elderly aunt found her name on accounts she'd never opened. Cousins discovered loans they'd supposedly co-signed. You stole from all of us. Emma's mother stood, her voice shaking. The $12,000 for Calvin's investment that was our savings. The dominoes fell fast. Relatives comparing documents, finding their signatures on papers they'd never seen. Their information used for accounts they'd never opened. The family WhatsApp group lit up on phones across the room as those not present started asking questions. Calvin tried to leave, but the security officers blocked the exit. Sir, the venue management has asked all parties involved to remain until law enforcement arrives. You can't hold me, he snarled. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone. You're trespassing. I'm the guarantor on this event as of, I checked the time, 6:45 this evening when the venue manager accepted my payment for tonight's balance. You're no longer welcome. The legal gymnastics Marisol had prepared were beautiful. The venue's concern about liability had let me assume financial responsibility for the event, making me the host. I could have them removed at any time. Dylan tried to stand, forgot his supposed injury, then remembered mid-rise and grabbed his knee again. Even the cousins who'd laughed at my fall weeks ago were shaking their heads in disgust. $237,000. Emma's father read from his packet. You stole nearly $250,000 from your own daughter. She owed us, Lorraine screeched, her composure completely gone. We raised her. We gave her everything. You gave me nothing but bills, I said quietly, but the mic carried it through the room. I've been paying for this family since I was 13. Every birthday, every Christmas, every emergency that wasn't really an emergency. I was your ATM with a pulse. I set the briefcase on the center table and opened it, revealing the bound evidence files. Full documentation is here. Every transaction, every forgery, every fraud. Copies have been submitted to the FBI, State Attorney General, Insurance Commission, and Labor Department. The investigations are already underway. An elderly uncle stood, his voice gravelly with rage. You used my granddaughter's college fund as collateral. More revelations erupted from the crowd as they discovered the extent of the theft. Calvin had been busy. Lorraine had been complicit. Dylan had been eager. The venue manager appeared with 2 uniformed police officers. There's been a complaint of financial fraud and identity theft. Multiple complaints, I corrected, as several relatives raised their hands. The officers began taking statements. The investigators coordinated with them, sharing jurisdiction information. Calvin demanded a lawyer. Lorraine cried real tears this time. Dylan couldn't decide whether to limp or not, destroying any remaining credibility. Emma stood at the head table, still in her engagement dress, watching her celebration become a crime scene. I walked over to her. I'm sorry, I said. This wasn't about you. No, she said, looking at her parents' devastated faces. This was overdue. They stole from my parents, too. From everyone. She squeezed my hand. Thank you for stopping them. As the officers led Calvin, Lorraine, and Dylan out for formal questioning, the room fell into stunned silence. The string quartet had long since stopped playing. The cake sat untouched. I picked up the microphone one last time. For those who've been affected, Marisol Vega's firm is offering pro bono consultations for identity theft recovery. Her cards are in your packets. Check your credit reports. Freeze your accounts if necessary. Protect yourselves. I walked to the door, my heels clicking on the same stone floor where I'd fallen weeks ago. At the threshold, I turned back. The room was chaos, family members comparing notes, making phone calls, some crying, others furious. The lights I'd turned on were still blazing, illuminating every corner, every shadow, every secret they'd tried to hide. Dylan was right about one thing. It was a perfect fall, just not mine. The investigations would continue for months. Criminal charges would be filed, restitution would be ordered, though I'd never see most of the money. But that night at the Lantern House, something more valuable was restored the truth. I walked out into the September evening, leaving my family's chaos behind. For the first time in 21 years, I was truly free. The books were balanced, the debts were marked, and I would never, ever fall for them again. Thank you so much for listening to this story of financial revenge and family reckoning. Where are you tuning in from today? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of you? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your own experiences. Let's discuss how sometimes the best revenge really is served with properly documented evidence and legal backing.